Hi, I'm Ethan. I love muzzleloading. Today we're talking with David from Lodgewood Manufacturing about his history in muzzleloading, his passion for it, and how that led him to purchasing a legacy muzzleloading and antique arms business, and how that relates to his passion really for sharing these arms, their history, their stories, and really getting muzzleloaders into the hands of new people and new, old, young and old muzzleloading enthusiasts alike.
That's all right. I got all the time in the world.
Okay, awesome.
So I'm happy to gab as long as you want to. I am,
Okay.
my only interest is really antique guns and muzzleloading. So, as you can imagine, when I have a captive audience,
Yep.
it's a lot more fun than when you're at a cocktail party and someone says, "What do you do?" And you try to give them the brief explanation, and they go, "Oh, my uncle, I think he has an old gun," and you're like, "Oh, really?" And then you talk to him, and it's like it's an old 22, you know?
Right.
So
Or
yeah,
I've got my
cool.
grandfather's muzzleloader, and it turns out it's a Thompson Center Hawken. You know.
Yeah, from 1970. Yeah, I've had
Yep.
that many times. Yeah, yeah. My name is David Stavlo. I am the owner and gunsmith of Lodgewood Manufacturing in Janesville, Wisconsin. I like to say we're a full-service antique gun shop. We sell antique parts for U.S. military guns. We sell antique guns, primarily muzzleloaders, but everything from the invention of gunpowder all the way up through World War II. And then we do gunsmithing, restorations, and custom builds as well.
So how did you get into that then? What was your start in muzzleloading and antique arms?
Yeah, so I credit my father with that, like so many people do. It's funny, Dad's not necessarily a gun guy. He's, he likes guns, but, we didn't necessarily grow up doing a lot of hunting or anything like that, but he's a huge history buff.
Okay.
I think I grew up in Wisconsin, but we had visited Colonial Williamsburg 4 times before I turned 18 as a
Oh,
family. That was the go-to. In fact, I remember he said at work that he was getting flack from his coworkers that he was going to take the family on another family vacation. And they said, "You going to Colonial Williamsburg again?"
it's not
That's the old-
Disneyland. It is Colonial
Yeah, exactly.
Williamsburg. I love that. That's great.
So, that my dad's love of history, primarily early American history, Revolutionary War, that sort of thing, it kind of eventually springboarded into the family becoming reenactors. We used to do Revolutionary War reenacting I think we started when I was 11 or 12. So kind of, my formative years. So that was my first exposure firsthand to muzzleloaders and antique guns. Dad bought a brown bass, a Pedersoli, and that was, the item that I absolutely coveted. That
Right.
was whenever I was not old enough to go out and take place in the battle reenactments, but whenever the gun wasn't actively being used by my dad, it was sitting on my lap, and I was inspecting it and patting it and just marveling at the beautiful double line border engraving on the lock plate and the little curl on the bottom of the trigger and the finials on the brass furniture and that sort of thing. And so, the goal then became I have to get a brown bass. So so I turned 16, and there's a greenhouse about a mile from my house, and I walk down there and I get a job for the summer, taking pots out of taking plants out of pots and then putting them in smaller pots for individual sale. And I did that all summer long in a greenhouse in 120 degree weather. Outside it's only 80 degrees, but you're in a greenhouse. So inside the
Yep.
greenhouse it's 120 degrees
Yep.
and got to be 90% humidity. And so it was just awful. But the goal was get a brown bass. So I saved up the whole summer. And a guy in my unit he was aging out of it. He was in his 70s. He had been reenacting, probably since the 1970s, honestly. And he had one of the very first issue Pedersoli Brown Besses. So it was like, okay, I'm buying it. So was actually we drove to Milwaukee, which was about an hour drive to where he lived, and I was had my learner's permit at the time, so I remember that trip being one of the first opportunities to drive a long distance through downtown traffic to get to his house.
Okay,
and so
yeah.
like it was
It's
a real
experience.
yeah, it was a real kind of baptism by fire in more ways than one. So we get there, and I see the gun, and this is before Gun Broker. This is before you could buy guns through the mail, or I mean you could, but there was not a lot of avenues to do so.
Right.
So it was like I get there, and the gun is worn out. I mean, it is used, and the stock is just beat to hell, and the frizzen has been sparked so many times it's gone soft, and the price is not great. I paid $700 for this gun in 2006, which honestly, I don't even know if that gun today is worth that much money, considering how rough it is. But it's like, what are your other options? So I buy the gun, and I get it home and spend that whole summer basically rebuilding it. So I redid the stock, the first stock I ever did. Pulled the whole thing apart, learned a whole bunch about it. Could have hardened the frizzen, but I didn't know how to do it. Nobody else I knew how to do it. So I just bought a new one from Pedersoli and fitted that up and polished it and made it look halfway decent. And then that became my most prized possession for the second half of my teenage years. Every reenactment, I was a Continental soldier out in the line with Dad, shoulder to shoulder, shooting at redcoats with our brown besses. I eventually we were like, can we actually shoot live ammunition out of these things? So at that point, internet forums were just, they were starting to become a little bit more popular. So we were reading internet forums about how to do live fire. So we went to the local gun range, and I think from Dixie Gun Works we got some 69 caliber musket balls. So we were not getting a lot of accuracy out of them because they're really ricocheting down the barrel in a big 75 caliber barrel. But had an absolute blast doing it. And then I went off to college and didn't do much reenacting, didn't talk about doing a whole lot of reenacting because it was kind of nerdy, especially Revolutionary War is very, very niche. And so it kind of stopped for a while, but always loved guns, always loved history. In fact, when I went to school and I majored in print journalism. Because my ultimate goal was to get my degree in journalism, kind of pay my dues doing, beat reporting for a newspaper, and then hopefully maybe someday get hired as a staff writer for like Guns and Ammo or American Rifleman or something, so I could work in the gun world and make money off of guns. It never occurred to me that I could open up my own gun shop or sell guns. I think that was just too scary. So ultimately, while we were in college, I started dating my wife, who at that time was my girlfriend, and she, out of an act of love, decided that she wanted to buy me a gun as a gift. So she was looking on Google at local gun shops in the area, and this shop called Lodgewood Manufacturing popped up, and they had a cruddy little 1990s website where it was like, the whole website was just one long page that you just keep scrolling down type of thing. And so she goes, come with me, and we're going to go someplace. So we drive downtown, it's a mile away from the university, and we stop in to this little dinky hole-in-the-wall black powder shop, and we meet the owner of the shop, a guy by the name of Bill Osborne. He had founded the shop in 1976, specializing pretty much exclusively in parts for Civil War era weapons, American military guns. And he was running it as a hobby business. He was generally not there very often, but he happened to be there that day. And we really hit it off with Bill, and Bill offered us part-time jobs right there on the spot. Wow. And Danielle worked in the office, my girlfriend, now wife, and I worked in the back helping Bill sort parts and kind of tinker with stuff. And it got to the point where we were at Lodgewood more than we were in class. So when we got to closer to graduation, Bill said, why don't you take over the shop? Why don't you buy the shop from me? And, looking back on it, if I had known then what I know now, I probably wouldn't have, because it was a tremendous risk. I mean,
oh yeah.
we ended up taking over the shop, and then there was $200 in the checking account when we took over. I mean, there no money whatsoever.
Yep. I know right where you're at, man.
Yeah, but we ended up taking it over and have been running it full time since 2012.
Wow.
So yeah, so it's been really good for us. I can't imagine doing anything else. I just love doing it. During my kind of initial tenure with Bill, kind of working under him, Bill had always had some different guns repaired by different gunsmiths in the area. Some real master gunsmiths that had been building guns for longer than I'd been alive.
Yeah.
And when they found out that Bill had a young kid working for him that was under age 70, they got all excited, because this is kind of, at the end of the day, it's kind of an old man's craft at this point. So a lot of those guys offered to take me on as apprentices, and so I was apprenticed to two really great guys that were absolutely master gunsmiths. First to a guy named Steve Krolik, who specializes specifically in early muzzleloaders, and he taught me a lot about woodworking and stocking and repairs and that sort of a thing. And then I also met a guy named Ken Howell, who's a master tool and die maker turned gunsmith. And he took me on as an apprentice and taught me a lot about machining and manufacturing parts and metal treatments and that sort of a thing. So as a combination of working with those two guys and then just a lot of practice here in the shop, I started building my own guns, marketing my own guns, doing a lot of restoration and repair. And then that's kind of turned into its own kind of subsection of the business as well.
Wow, man, that's just a fascinating story and something that I love to hear about. Like, I can imagine you being towards the end of your college career and him saying, "Why don't you buy the shop?" Like, that's just every time, like, I laugh because it's just such a fantastic thing. Like, it makes me so happy, but I can also imagine the fear of that, seeing that there's $200 sitting there for you to work with, and you think I've made the biggest mistake of my life, I assume.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, a lot of it was that 22-year-old naivety, and it's like, why? Yeah, we can do this.
We can
We've been doing this for 3-4 years. We can do this. Yeah. If I had to do it again in my mid-30s and start all over, I wouldn't have. But luckily, it ended up working out really well.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is like so many people, they go to college at 18 and you're asked, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? Figure that out now. Take a major, get a degree in that, and then, hope you have no regrets. Well, my wife, she was in communicative disorders, which she didn't particularly like all that well, but of course you don't really find that out until you've taken most of your credits. I found out that I hated journalism. The idea of being a beat reporter and having to report on local city council affairs for God only knows how many years while I sent freelance articles to gun magazines and hopefully got hired someday, was sounding less and less appealing, especially considering that I ultimately had to cover local city council events for the school newspaper. And it was absolutely horrible. So when Bill said, you ought to consider doing this full time, it was like anything but, journalism and comm disc, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. There's that grass is greener perspective there for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Even during, my tenure in college, the tone was shifting, and I remember my advisor saying, "Your graduating class is literally the last print journalism degree that we will offer."
Right.
In fact, halfway through, they changed it to a multimedia journalism degree, which included more video production and audio production. But of course, I had already taken a majority of my print classes, and they're like, well, good luck out there.
Yeah. You can stay for a few more semesters to take those classes, or you can, jump out of the nest. Huh.
Yeah. Right. So, one thing about an industry like this one is it doesn't change because we're trying to replicate something from 150, 250, 350 years ago. So, there's only so many ways you can build a musket. So
Right.
there's really no new technology that has helped. Some of the 3D printing has been helpful. The 3D printing lost wax so that you can make castings has been good. But other than that, I mean, even power tools really are not an asset because at the end of the day, you just got to work by hand,
Yeah. So are you doing then most of your work by hand, or what kind of machines? And I'm just ballparking here that you've probably got a lot of, post World War II machines. But what are you
Yeah.
working with on the day to day then?
So I have a full machine shop. I've got a pretty large lathe and a milling machine. I've got the overhead grinders, heat treating ovens, that sort of thing. Which all that stuff is really, really helpful for making parts for things. But at the end of the day, all the finishing just has to be by hand, So primarily it's handwork. I'd say about 80% of it is handwork. The rest of it is about 20% machine work and that sort of a thing. So you get really good with files and rasps and that sort of thing.
When you're talking about making parts, are you producing things in a pretty large quantity then?
No, I get a lot of requests for that because, everything I do is kind of old-fashioned. I'm a custom shop, not a production shop. So, a lot of guys, when they think of machining, they think of CNC, where you write a program, you put a block of steel in, you push the big green button, then you come back 45 minutes later and you have a part. Because I work on such a wide variety of stuff, it's more one-off, one at a time, custom parts. There's been a few things where I've made fixtures to make the things go faster, make setup time a lot less. Because the thing about machining is it's about 90% setup time and about 10% actual machine running.
Yeah.
And so if you've got fixtures that you can make to make that setup go faster, it cuts down a lot of time. But yeah, we do have parts that we have made in large runs, but we generally have other shops make those who have production capability. So some of our screws, some of our Colt springs, that sort of a thing, those are made off-site.
Interesting. And how big of a shop then are you working out of? And was this what existed when you purchased the shop, or have you added on or changed anything since then?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we were in the original shop in Whitewater from the time we took it over in 2012 until 2019. And Whitewater, we're in Janesville now. Whitewater's about 20 minutes away. And we lived in Janesville and still do live in Janesville. So the commute was becoming a bit taxing.
Yeah.
And then the fact too that the building we were in was built in 1880, and which is really cool and had a lot of great history, but it really had not been maintained. There was actually portions of the workshop area where you could look through the ceiling and see sky through the masonry, because it was just really had fallen into disrepair. Birds used to get in sometimes, which would scare the crap out of Danielle, my wife, and we'd have to chase them away and get them out. And that was always a fun morning.
Right.
But we moved the shop to a much newer location in 2019, which is a mile away from my house. And it's much larger. It's got a full machine shop area and warehouse area.
Okay.
And it has an office, and I'm in the office right now.
Yeah.
And but it's still pretty small. The whole shop, including the warehouse and the office area, and all of that stuff is only about 6,000 square feet.
Okay.
So for a house that would be big, but for a shop that's on the small size.
Yeah. Yeah. You drop a couple machines in there and some material and storage, and that gets eaten up real fast.
Yeah, right. So we definitely economize some space saving techniques as much as possible. But it works great for what we need it to be. There was always the discussion about, expanding the business. But, with that comes other challenges, the scaling things and then having to figure out, well, what are you going to do for more employees? What are you going to do for more space? What are you going to do for this, that, and the other thing? So I like where we are now. Obviously the intent is to grow the business, but to grow the business at a pace that we can keep up with it, and just doing it slowly, kind of 1 year at a time.
Yeah. I think it's important not to bite off. It's easier to bite off more than you can chew than it should be, it seems like.
Right. Absolutely. And, we're a small operation. There's only 2 other employees besides me.
Okay.
And that's my wife, Danielle. Like I said, she's been here since day one, and she does all the administrative stuff. So she does all the books, she does all the taxes, she does all the consignment checks, she takes all the photographs for the website, okay. She does a lot of the organization of the parts. And then the other person that works here is Danielle's mom, Linda. She does all the shipping. So if anybody listening has ever gotten a part or a gun from Lodgewood in the last 6-7 years, it has been personally packed by Linda.
Oh,
and
that's cool.
We've actually had people... Yeah, we've had people who have bought guns from us call us up and say, it took me 25 minutes just to get the damn thing out of the box. And I go, yeah, thank Linda for that. Because she spends a lot of time packing and making sure that nothing's going to get broken or damaged. And because of that, we rarely get stuff broken or damaged.
I was going to say, that's the kind of thing that you
want.
want.
Maybe 1 a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, because our business is almost exclusively mail order. We don't have local traffic because, I always say in southern Wisconsin, if you can't shoot a deer with it or shoot a bird with it, people generally don't want to buy it. So we sell a lot of parts to the East Coast. Okay. We sell a lot of stuff down south. We buy and sell a lot of stuff that is shipped in and out of here all the time. We know all of our UPS guys on a first name basis, and we. There's obviously some instances where it's unavoidable that an accident will happen. Like if you see tire tracks from a forklift on, on the cardboard, which we've had before. But other than that, if UPS does their job and we do our job, we very, very rarely have issues with stuff getting broken.
Have you seen? Because it sounds to me like you've kind of taken the business further to the online space. Have you seen much change with that as the internet shifted from the early days of the forums that you were talking about to where you're at now with a modern website and a modern internet presence?
Yeah, absolutely. I say all the time that I could not do what I do for a living without the internet.
Okay.
In fact, I actually consider our website to be the business, and then everything else, the workshop, the office, is all in support of the website, because that's kind of the forward-facing interface by which customers interact with Lodgewood. So even in doing this for the last 15 years, the internet has become so much of a better resource for antique guns and muzzleloaders than it was, like I said, even when I started in 2010. We used to buy and research a lot of physical books, because that was really the only avenues where any scholarship at all for antique guns was printed. There was very little on the internet, even photographs. Google Images obviously existed back then, but it was pretty rudimentary, and there wasn't a lot on there. Yeah. Within the last 15 years, the internet has become an extremely good place for learning, just education tool about antique guns. Google Images is invaluable when it comes to researching. You got an original gun here, and you go, this doesn't look quite right. Let me pull up a couple other examples from some of the big auction houses like Rock Island or Morphe's or something like that, and see if they've sold any within the last couple of years, and do a compare and contrast. And turns out this is the third model, and everything that I had seen was a fourth model. Stuff like that has been super handy. And like I said, with being able to check out online, both for our customers and also me personally when I'm buying parts from other vendors, just makes life so much easier.
That's fascinating. I love hearing that there's kind of a legacy business that started in the 70s with, kind of the peak rise of muzzleloading, for that generation, and you're able to continue it on, and there's been support there to keep that going.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've heard a lot of this too. But like we missed it, the peak. We came around and started doing it after the heyday.
Yeah.
Doing primarily Civil War stuff. We always would go to the NSSA Nationals.
Yeah.
Which is like the NMLRA Nationals for Civil War guns. And every time we would go, it was like, well, you guys should have been here 30 years ago. It's like, well, couldn't.
Yeah. Wasn't born.
But, I think that I don't know if the interest is waning so much as it's just changing.
Yeah.
I think the barrier to entry for a lot of people getting into muzzleloaders and antique guns was pretty high, because if you didn't know somebody personally who could show you what to do, what to buy, what not to buy, it was difficult to get started. Like I said, referencing the first time I ever took my Repro Brown Bess out, the only reason I bought 69 caliber ammunition for a 75 caliber muzzleloader was because I couldn't find anybody else on the internet or locally to tell me not to. But now if you want to set up and start shooting, there's a bunch. You can buy everything you need online, as far as ammunition, bullets, flints, even powder if you're willing to pay the hazmat fees.
Yeah.
And you can also find all sorts of great references, both in the form of YouTube, internet forums, different articles that people have published about what to do, what not to do. And so I think that is bringing down that barrier to entry. I think also, too, there's a lot of guns that are available now that weren't before, both in original guns and reproduction guns. Again, you've got avenues like Gunbroker and other websites like mine that buy and sell guns, and you have a vested interest in making sure that the guns are described as accurately as possible, because I'm aware that if somebody buys a gun from my website, they can't see it in person. And so when I'm writing the description for an antique firearm or a reproduction, I want to make sure that I can tell that person who might be interested in buying it absolutely every single thing that I can see about the gun, and make sure that they're making an informed purchase, and can they can send an email, a link to their friend and say, what do you think about this one? Or they can call me and ask me additional questions. So I think that's a really good thing from the standpoint of new shooters. It's not as intimidating as it used to be. Mm-hmm. And I think for that reason, the future is pretty bright, in comparison to what some of the old timer gloom and doom. Oh, they don't teach history in school anymore, and that's why kids don't want to shoot muzzleloaders. It's like, I don't think it's that simple.
Yeah, I think it's very complex. I really like the way that you've put that, because it sounds like you're trying to, in a way, help a younger version of you with that first Brown Bess. Like, you are solving or trying to solve all the problems that you had initially with your first purchase. Like, all the trepidations, all the hesitations that you might have had with that. You have that viewpoint that you're trying to bring and trying to make sure that other people don't have. And I really love that. That's just a great perspective.
Yeah, and I consider a large portion of my job to be education, because like we talked about, a lot of the guys that do work in this space and collect antique guns or shoot antique guns are north of 60 years old. I mean, a lot of them are older than my parents. And there, like I say, I think there is interest from guys our age, but they are, they just have not been exposed to it. So one thing I do is I do free appraisals for people. If you have an old gun and you want to know what it is, and some history on it. If you want to know a general idea of what it's worth, you can shoot me an email and I'll let you know what it is. If you're local, you can call, make an appointment, and stop by the shop. And I try to give people as much history as possible because, like I say, they all tell a story, whether it's a reproduction of an antique or an actual antique. They're important characteristics of history, and the stories about the guns are oftentimes more interesting than the physical guns themselves. I also, and like I say, I do think there's a lot of interest because I've been getting a lot of calls from local historical societies here in Wisconsin to do general talks about antique firearms.
Oh, cool.
And they've been pretty well attended. I am no public speaker, and I have never advertised being a public speaker or having any interest in doing lectures. But when you get a historical society that calls you and says, "Can you do a talk to 50 people?" It's like, well, that's 50 people that I can tell about antique guns. So yeah. Sure. And
right.
There's a lot to say. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, got to spread the gospel of muzzleloaders.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. I think that's the kind of community outreach it's hard to quantify. I think the benefit to it, but even if it just makes somebody a little more comfortable with that, I've had several local people here around the shop bring in their antique, muzzleloaders of some kind, and we had one guy bring one in, and thankfully we live in the middle of nowhere, so it's a coffee shop in the middle of nowhere, so nobody really bats an eye when somebody brings a rusty old muzzleloader in, which is kind of cool. But they'd been told that it used by great grandpa in the Civil War and had all this story and history through it, and unfortunately I had a little bit of a different perspective on it, but that person went home.
Had that conversation many times.
Yes, yeah, I'm sure you're right where that's at. But they go home maybe with a little more understanding and some research points to learn a little bit more about their family history. There's nothing to say that this didn't help sustain your family, but it didn't necessarily help win a big battle somewhere. And there's kind of
right. It's like kill notches on revolver grips. Can't tell you how many people. I mean, literally last week, a guy came in with an 1842 Aston, cavalry pistol, Mexican War vintage, and it had 3 X's on the grip that were very plainly, put there intentionally. And he goes, "What do you think about this, huh?" And I go, "Yeah." I said, "You know what I think they are?" He goes, "Kill notches." I said, "Yeah, probably foxes in the hen house."
Right.
And he goes, "Well, what do you mean?" I go, "Well, listen, first of all, to have 3 confirmed kills with a pistol as a cavalryman in the Mexican-American War would be pretty prolific. I mean, he would probably be written up for some sort of presidential accommodation. Secondly, and what everybody forgets about antique guns, especially guns from the Civil War, is they were in military service for 4 years. And then they were on the civilian market for 160 years after the fact. And they had really, really long service lives as hunting weapons, as sporting weapons, long after they were military weapons. Yeah. I remember as a kid reading Wiley Clapp talking about shooting squirrels out of trees with a new model 1858 Remington revolver in the 1930s, and then carving a notch in the butt of his pistol every time he killed a squirrel. Well, years from now, somebody's going to see that gun and think, "Man, this must have been a heck of a gunfighter." It's like, well, no, I mean, it was a kid with squirrels.
I mean, in a way, that's a pretty good success rate.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
yeah, right. I mean, I've never shot a squirrel with a handgun, so
we got to pump those numbers up, man. We got to get you.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're too focused on the business here. You got to be focused on doming some squirrels,
Yeah, absolutely. But like I said, with dealing with people and customers, I get a lot of people who have, these family heirlooms that have been in their family for at least, 100 years, because that's how long that they can trace the lineage back, if not further.
Yeah.
And, they're a lot of times they're surplus Civil War, 1860 Army Colts or muskets, and they say, "I want to restore this gun back to new." And can you do it? Sure, but I always say to these people, look, this has been in your family history for 100 years, and if I make this gun look new, I'm erasing all of the dings and dents that all of your ancestors put in that gun.
Yeah.
And I said, and I'm not sure that you want to do that. And when you put it that way, a lot of times they go, yeah, you're right. Let's just make it functional again. And so that's what I prefer doing. I don't generally like building guns back to as new. I mean, we can do it. We have done it. But I like to just put them back to, serviceable condition. So, parts missing, you replace the part, make and replace the parts, or source original parts and put them on, make sure they all match, make sure they look, like they've been there for a while. Because a mentor of mine told me once, your job as a restorationist is to be a chameleon. And in other words, if I've worked on a gun or I've built a gun and it's on a gun show table, I don't want somebody to say, that looks like David Stavlo's work. I want them to look at that gun and see, the guy at the Winchester factory in 1886, or, the guy working in Birmingham, England, carving a stock on a P-53 Enfield in 1863. I don't want them to see, a distinctive style of finish or a distinctive style of stock carving or shaping that would signify that I worked on it. Because if I do that, I'm erasing all of that legacy and all that history from that gun. Yeah. And for me, it's about the history above all else.
I think that's very honorable. What do you think?
Thank you.
But seriously, it is, because I struggle with our kind of modern thoughts about value and in relation to how something looks. Like you talking about restoring something to as new, whereas for me, like I was just a few days ago talking to somebody about muzzleloading and trying to make sure that the barrel and the bore remained as new. And to me, there's something to that of accepting that this isn't a perfect system. This is black powder. Yeah. It's a natural component. It's not perfectly ideal. It's not ideal in any environment. And to me, that's kind of part of it. I want to keep my bores in good condition. I want to keep locks and things functioning, of course, but I don't necessarily want it to look as if I've never taken it out. Yeah,
absolutely. And you said it. I mean, if it's not a perfect system, it's rudimentary. There's a reason. I just said to a customer yesterday, there's a reason that the Marine Corps is not using Whitworth muzzleloaders to do 1,000-yard sniping anymore.
They should be.
And yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the problem. That's why the Afghan pullout was so disastrous.
Put me in charge. I'm going to fix this day one. We're going back to muzzleloading.
That's right.
It's going to fix it.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, they should have some character, and and the thing too is, the nature of muzzleloading is, it's wear and tear. I mean, especially when you're shooting later muzzleloaders, the gun set up for mini balls and that sort of a thing. The more you shoot it, the more you're going to let up that barrel, and because it's a lead bullet with an expanding skirt, it directly engaging that rifling. And I've had a lot of customers talk to me like, oh, I don't want to shoot it because it's going to get leaded up. It's like, well, first of all, you're going to have to shoot it a lot for that to happen. And second, cross that bridge when you come to it. I mean, no, it's not the easiest thing in the world to remove a lead, but you can do it, and there's reverse electrolysis that you can do. And I remember guys used to take mercury and pour them down and then sit it over to. And we can't do that anymore. Nope. But boy, did that work out well. Yeah. But yeah, out. I mean, the thing is they're meant to be used, and as long as you treat them with respect, there's no reason why you can't use them. Now, I do differ a little bit in that regard when it comes to very, very high condition antiques.
Okay.
I'll never forget. I never forget. We were at the NSSA Nationals in Winchester, Virginia, and we used to set up a gunsmithing booth down there, and we do some field repairs, and we would sell guns down there. We would sell parts, and it was right in the aftermath of a hurricane that was still off the coast. And, Winchester's down in the Shenandoah Valley. So what happens is a storm will come in from the west, go down into the valley. And then if there's a hurricane on the east and it's blowing from east to west, that storm gets stuck in the Shenandoah Valley. So we were there for 5 days, and it just rained cats and dogs. And, of course, they didn't cancel the shoot. So this guy comes in, it's Saturday. The shoots had started on Wednesday. And he brings this Smith carbine that at least had looked like it was pulled right out of a crate. The gun was absolutely beautiful, or at least it was absolutely beautiful. But he had been shooting it in the rain for several days, and it was really starting to show it. It was starting to have visible rust around each of the screw heads. The color case hardening was starting to rust, because color case hardening is not a good rust inhibitor. The stocks were starting to get, how a oil finished wood stock looks like when it gets wet. It gets real light color. And he goes, I can't get the hinge screw out of this gun. And I go, were you shooting this gun? And he goes, yeah, absolutely. And I go, had anybody shot it before you? And he goes, I don't think so. It was pretty nice. And I said, buy a Pieta, put this away, shoot this on a sunny day, don't shoot it in the rain. I mean, there's very, very few unfired Civil War carbines anymore. And it's a controversial thing to shoot them at all. It's even worse so than to abuse them. And I think it's, we talk about, as antique gun collectors, you don't truly own anything. You're just the caretaker of it until the next generation. And our job is to be good stewards and to, I always say, first do no harm, And if you're shooting something in the rain that was really, really nice and you're actively making it not really, really nice, you're not being a good steward of that gun for the next generation, because the whole thing is, how many other 150-year-old guns are there that still look like they did the day they were made in 1863? So my thing is shoot them, but shoot them when it's 70 and sunny. And then shoot them for an hour and then spend 3 hours cleaning them and just do it immaculate. And then after that, handle it with white gloves until you shoot it the next time.
I have the muzzleloaders I use on the channel are kind of my, not beater, but I'm not nervous about that at all. I'll go out and shoot them, clean them, and there are muzzleloaders in our family collection that I want to feature on the channel, but I want to make sure that I can spend the time appropriately doing that, because my grandfathers aren't around anymore. They're not working on those anymore, and I can maintain them, but I'm chasing a toddler around right now, and that takes up. I can't necessarily set aside 3 hours to make sure I've got this disassembled and cleaned. Whereas something I'm okay with showing a little wear, I can take that out and have some fun.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely the guns you take out once or twice a year. And you have to kind of plan around it, the logistics. And then there's also the guns that you just, if you happen to find yourself with an hour free on a Saturday, you go, go kick around the woods with this for a little bit. And if I get to clean it sometime this week, I'll be happy.
So what are some of your common, I don't know if jobs is the right word, but what are some of the more common activities that you're doing in the shop on kind of a day-to-day basis then?
Yeah, so because our specialty has always been Civil War, we're kind of known for that. And also, too, when it comes to the whole scope of antique guns, like I say, from the invention of gunpowder all the way up through World War II, the largest cross-section of existing antique guns that survived are U.S. Civil War rifles, or just U.S. Civil War guns, because there were millions made between 1861 and 1865. So, they only made like 125,000 Winchester 1886s, but they made 1 million Model 1861 Springfields if you add up all of the 24 contractors that made them. And so because there's so many of them around, those end up being the ones that I am asked to fix most often. So I do a lot of restoration work, like I said, and like I mentioned, it's not full-blown restoration work. It is making the gun whole, for lack of a better term, taking guns that have obvious missing parts or are broken or have not been shot in 100 years, that, like we talked about, a guy wants to make it as an occasional shooter, and then just getting them up and running again. Yeah. I've become kind of the de facto single action guy for repairing single action revolvers, cap and ball revolvers. Yeah. Your new model Remingtons, 60 Army Colts, 51 Navies, 49 pockets, and then expanding into the Old West, 75 Remingtons, 73 Colts, that sort of a thing, because that is kind of deceptively difficult. Colts only have like 3 moving parts inside, but those moving parts all have to kind of do multiple functions, and in order to get them to time right, you have to kind of, it's almost a little bit of a juggling act. Okay. And so I do a lot of retiming of actions. I build a lot of custom guns for guys. I work a lot with the rifle shop, Jane and Jess Mallow in Oklahoma, and do a lot of their kits. A lot of repair work and a lot of custom builds.
What jobs or processes do you like doing the most?
Yeah. I really, really like building guns. My focus in building muzzleloaders is different than like the modern long rifle culture, in that I focus almost exclusively on military guns. Yeah. And the reason I do that is because I find it a fun challenge to try and recreate something that a large majority of the public already knows what it looks like. Mm-hmm. In other words, like, the long rifle builders, those guys are artists. But when they build a gun, I don't know if the gun that they've actually built is what they intended to build when they kind of designed it in their head. Right. Yeah. Let's say you start off, you want to build a copy of the Johannes Faber rifle, and what you end up with is, just something that's kind of general Virginia 1760s, because, the flock plate didn't fit quite right, or the side plate wasn't what you wanted, or the engraving wasn't as fine as you had hoped. But if you're building a military rifle, there's a lot of examples of those in books and museums, online. And so when you build that, the goal is to make it look like something that could have actually, been around in 1745 or 1803 or 1865. And so I find that to be a fun challenge, trying to recreate those details as much as possible. Those are my favorite. There's no money in building guns, because once you, and this, once you put all the time into it, you're lucky if you can clear minimum wage. But I still do a lot of it, because I enjoy it. It's my favorite portion of the whole business, and B, I actually look at it as our advertising budget. So what you can't, what you can't make up for in charging the customer for the gun. And, they're still not cheap, but you still can't get your money out of what you got into it in time. No, it's impossible. You can still kind of leverage into promotion. I built a Baker rifle for one of the staff writers at the American Rifleman magazine, and it turned out really well. And he ended up doing a full page kind of write up on the gun and Lodgewood and the business. Nice. And so even though I couldn't have possibly charged him anything near what I had in the gun as far as time goes, the article that we got out of it, I couldn't have ever possibly have been able to afford a full page ad in the American Rifleman magazine. So, and the more guns that get out into the world, the more people share them on social media. They share them on the forums. They do YouTube videos, and they get your name out there, and it drives people to the website for not only gun building but for other things too.
Yeah.
You see a cool brown vest that I did for a guy, and then where did you get that? Oh, Lodgewood in Wisconsin. You Google Lodgewood, and then you see, oh, they've got a pretty nice selection of original antique guns, or oh, they also sell parts, or he's doing repair work on other guns. So I kind of look at it as the advertising budget for the company, and that's kind of at least how I justify it in my mind.
Right. Yeah. Your brain will always work to justify it, to do something that you want to do or enjoy. But I see where you're coming from there, because it sounds like the pieces that you're building, there are some very clearly defined parameters for those. And when you're able to meet those parameters, that piece becomes a really good business card out in the world. And it's not like something that, like a digital ad that you can track all this data from, but you're putting out something that you are proud of, and ideally the way the universe works, that brings some goodness back to you.
Right, and I'm very, very detail obsessed. It's to my own detriment. I could make more money building guns if I didn't obsess over all the small details. And I know everybody says that, but there
are degrees,
for me,
for sure.
I build guns for myself and then sell them in order to be able to continue to live, to be able to continue to afford to build guns.
Right.
So when I'm building a gun on commission for a customer, I'm building that gun as if it were going to be in my own personal collection, and I put the details in it that I would want to see, up to and including I work with custom steel die makers to make replicas of the original proof marks for the guns that I'm building. If I'm building a Harper's Ferry gun, Harper's Ferry had a very specific eagle head proof mark on the barrel. I'm not going to put a Springfield proof mark on it, even though you could show that gun to 10 people and only 1 out of 10 people would even appreciate the fact that it's got a Harper's Ferry eagle and a Harper's Ferry gun. But I know, and when I look at it, that's what I see. And, so... And because of that, you're spending a lot of money on dies, you're spending extra time researching and this, that, and the other thing. But then on the flip side, when it is finished, there's nothing that people can poke holes in and go, well, that's not right, or it'd be nice if he did that. And then that's the thing that drives business to your company. So
right, it's just that easy.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Just make more money, right?
This is a master class in gunsmithing as a business. No, but honestly, it is. Like these are. I joke because I understand. All of the gun builders and the gun makers that I talk to echo this sentiment, regardless of age. And that's why I'm not laughing at you, and I hope it doesn't come off that way to you or the listener. Because
no, because I know you built a few guns too, and I know you've had a lot of time in those as well. Everybody does. Yeah. If you're doing a nice job and you really care about it, you're going to be so underwater in the amount of time you've got into it that you can't possibly afford to sell it and make a profit. You can hope to cover your costs,
right? And
that's really what my goal is. But like I say. And that's another incentive to do as fine of a detail as possible, because if you've got all that time in it and it still kind of looks like garbage, then it's not going to attract anybody to your business anyway. So,
yeah. Do you feel like does it? This might be a weird way to put it, but is it like scratch an itch for you? To figure this, to go through the process of figuring this stuff out? Like, is that how your brain works? Is that where you're getting like a dopamine hit of working on something until it's right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. At the end of the day, the reason I do this work is because I'm a history buff. And a gun nerd, and building guns from history are just two ways to combine those things together. When I'm building and that's another reason I like working on military guns, is because other people have had to use the same processes that I'm using to build them, 250 years ago. if I'm building a gun and I'm having the same trouble with it, and you think about it, and you end up solving the problem, and then you, after the fact, read something in an original document, or you are examining an original, and you see the same evidence that of whatever you did in that gun having been built the same way that you had to solve that problem. That's to me, I joke, it's like opening up a wormhole and talking directly to the guy who's working, at the Tower Arsenal, in the 1750s, or the grunt who's having to polish barrels in Springfield, in 1855. That's as close to, and I've done all sorts of living history and reenactment and stuff, and when you pretend that you're living 200 years ago or 100 years ago, and I love that too, but that doesn't, for me, connect me with history nearly as much as that sort of thing. I was building a brown bess a few years ago, and was just having a whole bunch of trouble getting the lock moldings on either side of the stock even. On the left side, every brown bess I've done, the left side lock molding is always slightly shaped differently than the right side. And I'm thinking about it, and I get Eric Goldstein and Stuart Mowbray's book, The Brown Bess, which is a great book, and they got images of a couple hundred brown besses in there. And I'm paging through it, and I'm really looking, because they've got really good blown up full color images, and I'm looking at every single brown bess has a left side counterpane that is shaped differently than the right side, and I'm like, here we go. I mean, I'm not going to lose any more sleep over it.
Yeah.
And when you see stuff like that, and the only reason that you would see something like that is if you were working on it and had to solve that same problem yourself.
Yeah.
Because I had had that book. I had looked at original brown besses and never noticed that until I was confronted with the same problem that the guys in Birmingham had back then, and that's, you got to make these two sides even, and you also these are military guns at the end of the day. So you can't afford to spend 1 billion hours on one stock if you're getting paid piecemeal. So they got it close enough, and if you really truly want to do the gun justice, all you do as a builder in the 21st century is get the gun close enough, just like they did.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing too, is like a lot of times you have to strike a balance between making the gun nicer than it was originally. Because I build a lot of Confederate guns because they're just so tremendously rare. And like Fayetteville rifles, for instance, are notoriously rough, especially guns made later in the war. They have visible file marks on them. They have visible machine marks. The stocks are not finely finished. And if I truly made a true copy of a Fayetteville and I sent it to a customer, he would be mad because there would be file marks and all over the thing. So you have to, as much as I would like to, because I think that would be cool. If I was ever building one for myself, I would.
Yeah.
But you have to make things to the expectations of a 21st century audience as well, as much as you want to make a true copy of something.
Yeah, you see that in. You could see that in everything, but something I see it a lot in is furniture and cars. A lot of car restoration.
Yeah.
Or even. Where I'm at, there's a few people who have restored tractors, like old John Deeres and things.
Okay. Yeah.
Taking John Deere paint to almost sports car level quality when
putting clear coat gloss on it.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good example. Or the muscle cars that people restore, and there's no overspray on the inside of the fenders.
Right.
Or anything. It's like,
it's all crisp.
GM didn't care. They weren't masking stuff off.
Right. Yeah. This is on a line. Get it done.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's a spray it. Yeah. The guy was in this paint booth with a cigarette and a sprayer.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things I really enjoy the most about making stuff associated with muzzleloading, whether that's like a bag or a horn, because I like to try a lot of different things. And like when I'm working on something, I think that Kibler Woods Runner kit that I did last year is that's the most recent kit I've done, although I'm itching real bad to do some more. But there were a couple times on that where I was running my chisel or my file and I like bumped into something on the stock. and where you have to just reorient.
The grain goes the other direction. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And it was just like, I'm sharing this moment with who knows how many hundreds of people over hundreds of years. And, when you're working late in the shop and you're just with your own thoughts, you're out of podcasts to listen to, there's just that weird moment, like you said, where there's that wormhole and you're just like, man, this is cool. Like somebody else had the same thing.
That's exactly right.
And like, we'll never know each other.
For at least a few seconds. Yeah, for at least a few seconds, you're there.
Yeah.
You are with that guy. You are that guy.
Yeah.
And and there's something really primal, for lack of a better word, about doing something in the exact same way with the exact same tools that a craftsman 300 years ago did.
Yeah.
And it's an incredible feeling, and you talk about getting connected to history, and I've never felt that feeling in any other thing, not in gun collecting, not in living history, but in gun building. Certainly, it's it's euphoric almost.
Yeah, yeah. I will say I have gotten it sleeping outside with one blanket. And a little fire. There's a lot of there's a lot going on there. A lot of thinking.
I mean, a few different feelings.
Yeah. So, what is something that is like your least liked to work on with the volume of stuff that you've done? Like, what's something that you're like, not to like push away any potential customers, of course, but what's something that comes into the shop that you're just like, oh boy.
Yeah. Things get really not fun after somebody else has really, really messed them up.
Okay.
And not to denigrate any modern gunsmiths. I mean, don't ask me to put a barrel in a Remington 700. I'm not the guy to do that.
Yeah.
Don't ask me to mount a scope on anything. I have no jigs. I have no interest. But at the same time, don't ask a guy who's putting barrels on Remington 700s and scopes on Winchester lever actions to repair a single action revolver or to drill out the cone on an original percussion gun, because there are some things about, the antique guns can be deceptively difficult sometimes.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about timing single actions, there's not a lot to them. And in theory, they're simple to do, but there's a lot of tricks that you kind of have to know in order to kind of get over some pitfalls that a lot of guys will get stuck at. And Dremel tools and buffing wheels have been both the biggest asset and the biggest downfall of the modern gunsmith ever. So I have had a lot of instances where, and the work I do is specialized. So I've had people contact me about something, and they'll say, here's the problem, can you fix it? And I go, I sure can, just send it to me. And they go, well, you're in Wisconsin, I'm in Nebraska, I don't really want to ship it, so you don't hear from them. And then, 6 months go by, and then they kind of email you back with their tail between their legs, and they go, I took it to Bob's Gunsmithing down the street, and he had never seen one of these before, but he was pretty sure he could fix it. And then he goes, now the problem's even worse, and so you get it. And you spend so much time just trying to get it back to the original problem that it had when the guy contacted you originally, and much less to solve the problem, that it can be really frustrating because, like I say, the biggest thing is first do no harm. And if you're working on something and you don't know what it is and you don't know how it works and you're actively making the problem worse, stop, know when to back away, contact an expert, and kind of play to your strengths. Like I said, there are things that I don't do because that's not my expertise. Like there's all sorts of guys that are setting up shotguns for clay pigeon, for really, really serious clay shooting and stuff. And I had somebody at church ask me if I could put an adjustable comb on a shotgun, and it was like, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, maybe, but geez, no.
Yeah.
That's not what I do. They didn't have adjustable combs in the late 19th century.
If they would have had them, they'd have used them.
Oh boy. Oh boy. Yep.
Brings a whole new term to sporterizing. If we start sporterizing some muskets, Need a nice Harper's Ferry flintlock
I had
with an
a
adjustable comb.
I had a original C.S. Richmond Confederate musket that somebody had threaded for a poly choke. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it goes to show you they had a long life after the war, a really long life. I mean, at least to the 50s. Yeah.
It was killed at that point. You put the poly choke in, and that was it. She's dead, Jim.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, absolutely.
Time of death right there. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm laughing and crying over that one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it's an interesting duality for guns and gunsmithing, because I really like muzzleloading. I understand some about modern firearms, but breech loading is a sin, so I don't go too far into it.
Yeah.
You know, but people hear that I'm interested in guns, and they, but there's that with gunsmithing too. My father is an engraver and does engraving, but gets a lot of similar requests like you're talking about to mount scopes and do this and do that. And it's like, no, there's nothing against the guys that do that stuff, of course. Like, it's absolutely needed, and many of them do great work, but there is there's some separation there that can be hard for somebody who isn't exposed to the culture, I guess I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's funny because my interests are pretty narrow. I mean, I do 500 years of history.
Yeah,
but the thing is where my interest ends is where most gun guys' interests begin.
Yeah.
So, like, you meet somebody and they're like, "What do you do for a living?" And you give them the brief rundown. And they go, "Oh, I also like guns." And you go, "Here we go." And they're like, then they start telling you about their AR-15s and their Glocks and their staccato, this and that and the other thing. And I mean, I've got an AR-15. Who doesn't? But I can't remember the last time I shot it, and I don't have any interest. And I'm starting to realize have less and less in common with gun guys and more in common with just general historians. I mean, In fact, I often will describe myself as a historian whose main focus is firearms.
Yeah.
Because, like, I don't want to see your Glock with the Punisher skull etched onto the slide.
There's a culture divide. And
I don't want to
culture clash.
There is. I don't want to talk to the Black Rifle bros. I don't play in that lane. I don't know that lane, and so it's And a lot of times, you kind of explain what you like, and they're like, "No, I don't think so."
That sounds old. Like, it
that's I don't know about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think my uncle has a Hawken. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it's because people ask me about the like the channel and things, and it might be inside baseball, I guess, but I understand and accept that there's a limited audience. Like, you'll never see me getting jacked, building out the ultimate muzzleloading range and doing it full time.
Yeah.
Like, there's just not the capacity for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's not the there's not, and when you were talking about that, about, the ARs and the Glocks and things, and there's a real divide in that culture where I think a lot of modern things are, not to sound too degrading, but it's very consumer focused. It's very much a follow the buy, keep up with the Joneses kind of thing. And the antique side of things, it can be like that. Not saying that it isn't, but there's some real meat to it. There's some real connection there. That you can absolutely kind of transition from the modern end of things and get interested in muzzleloading and the traditional antique side of things, of course. But I think it's the people that recognize that connection and the real meat and potatoes of it, and I think the cultural importance at a core that kind of draws you to that.
Yeah.
And I really like that, where you think of yourself more of as on the historian side of things, because that's really the guns are cool, the guns are great, but there's so much history with every little piece through that.
Right, and the question I often get is, well, why guns? Well, why not original, Chippendale furniture, or
Yeah.
why not pottery shards out in New Mexico? And I've thought about this a lot, and I think that guns, from the invention of the firearm all the way up until today, are kind of the catalyst for history. Guns are kind of the enforcement arm of governments. They are the real things that actually kind of put your money where your mouth is when it comes to change, when it comes to declarations of independence, when it comes to political or religious disagreements. And so, to study human history is not done without studying the role of the gun and how that was influenced. I mean, when Teddy Roosevelt says speak softly and carry a big stick, the big stick is a big gun.
Yeah, he was rather transparent.
He's talking about military
that.
might. Yeah, right. So that's the big stick diplomacy for you right there. But guns are the catalyst for history, and I think without guns, if we were still fighting each other with pointy sticks and stuff like we did for thousands of years prior to the invention of gunpowder, I think the political landscape, I think the global landscape would be so much different than it is, and I don't think that would have changed a whole lot. I don't think there would have been a whole lot of innovation and a whole lot of modern countries and that sort of thing as we know it today without the firearm. So, when people ask me why firearms, it's because I think when it comes to material culture from history, I think they're one of the most important items of material culture from the past.
Yeah, I bring up the mention of Henry Ford and interchangeability of parts in things.
Yeah.
And I always make the argument, just to be ornery, that we were doing that with muzzleloaders hundreds of years before Ford and the assembly line in cars.
That's right.
And
That's right. Yeah.
There's a ton of industry through these time periods outside of firearms, but they were massive industries for that time period. And they're an industry that's still around, not nearly as touched. We're not building ships out of trees anymore, I think is a big one for me. Like, you're not clearing forests to build navies. You're doing other things, but at the end of the day, a gun is still a gun. And I mean, there's wood and there's steel, and there's parts, and that's cool to me. That's cool.
One of the things I think about a lot is how little innovation there have been in firearms since they were invented. Like the muzzleloader, is invented like in the late medieval period, and becomes the only fire operating system right up until basically 150 years ago. Yeah. There were other people that experimented with some early breech loading stuff, but that was all really niche, But when it comes to the way that armies fought and the way that people shot at food, they were still taking gunpowder, dropping it down the end of a barrel, and then putting a bullet on top of it. And even since that, you get self-contained cartridges, but the self-contained cartridges have only really been around for 150 years, and we still, in our modern military, with the latest and greatest SIG Spear or whatever it's called, with that composite 6-point whatever cartridge, at the end of the day, it's still a primer and powder and a bullet on top of it.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have laser guns, despite what we were all promised when we were kids. It was all going to be, or electromagnetic rail guns and this, that, and the other thing. Nope, it's just not there. I mean, there's only so many ways you can invent a better mousetrap, and it's propellant underneath a big solid projectile. Slug.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great perspective. I hadn't really thought about that, but yeah, you have ignition, propellant, and projectile, and that's your combo.
Yeah.
Still to this day.
Yeah.
Huh. Let me look here at what we've got. Let me shut off. I've got a Roomba that cleans up the shop, and it's running.
I can't hear it.
Okay.
All right.
Just in case.
I'll shove my earbuds in a little further while you do that.
It's actually in the next room over, so it's not mine. I've got just a few minutes here on the camera.
Okay. I'm having a great time, so don't end it on my account.
Okay, yeah. I'm kind of bummed to see that the camera has. I am bummed. I'm not just kind of bummed. I am bummed, but we'll have to do this again sometime for sure.
Absolutely, anytime. Yeah.
Kind of looking at my last couple questions here. What tips do you have for aspiring craftsmen? I get a lot of questions about that for people diving in, wanting to do this kind of thing, and they don't know where to go. So any kind of resources or books or anything you can point somebody to, I'd love to share that.
Yeah, I get that a lot too. My biggest advice for somebody who wants to start building specifically antique guns, or muzzleloaders, or early cartridge guns, is you have to learn it the way it was taught originally, and that's via an apprentice system. There are no schools that are offering actual degrees in antique gunsmithing, because that school would go out of business pretty quick. But there are a lot of guys who are, like I said, older than my parents, 70s, 80s, that have lifetimes of knowledge that they've accrued from an entire career of doing, custom antique guns, restorations, repair work, on specifically antiques or muzzleloaders, that are dying to pass that knowledge on to somebody who's serious about it. And that's the other thing too. The other advice I would give to somebody who wants to get started is you have to love it. You just have to, because like I joke with people, my hobby is also my business. If I'm not here at the shop working on or building antique guns, I'm laying in bed at night thinking about working or building on antique guns, or I'm reading books about antique guns. It's what I like to do. And that passion is what drives you on days when it's not fun. Yeah. Because, if it was always fun, it wouldn't be called work. And I love what I do, and I would never change it. I always joke with people, if I won the lottery on a Sunday night, I would still come to work on Monday morning. I just probably wouldn't answer the phone anymore.
Right. You finished that wall gun kit?
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah, it's so close.
I know right where you're at, man. I know right where you're at.
Yeah. It's been there. It's been close for about a year.
Yep.
But when it stops being fun and it starts to feel like work, it's that passion that's going to keep you going to a point where it starts to be fun again. I always, I used to say to people, like, I would not be a good sewing machine salesman because I don't care about sewing machines. I'm a fairly good gun salesman because I really, really like them. I know people who have started in this business who didn't really care about history or antique guns, but just saw an opportunity to make some money. Yep. And they made a little bit of money for a while, and then they ultimately quit because it stopped being fun and it started to be work, and the money wasn't as good as it was when they started. And you kind of have to ride out those times. So the first thing that you need to have is just a passion for it. And then secondly, you need to find somebody and convince them that that you have the same passion that they do, who is at a point where they can afford to be able to teach you. Because like at this point, I'm not in a position where I could take on an apprentice, because I'm still actively trying to build the business and support a family. But in my twilight years, when I'm older, when I'm 60s, 70s, if there's somebody who's younger who wants to come on and learn, I would be overjoyed about that, to be able to pass down that knowledge and kind of have a bit of a legacy there. But then again, of course, there's the horror stories of the apprentices that maybe I want to build an antique gun, and then they work for 2 or 3 days and they go, this is a lot of work. Yeah. So that's why I say first it has to be passion, and then it has to be patience, and then you have to find somebody who you can convince that you have those two elements, and then have them take you on as an apprentice. Mm-hmm. And it helps if you get along with the guy you're apprenticed to as well.
Yeah.
There's a famous story about Hugh Glass, who was a gun maker's apprentice, and he ran away. He hated him so much he went out into the mountains and got attacked by a bear.
Right.
So,
and that was better somehow.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, shoot. Well, so where can people then find your work? You know, if they've listened to this and they've never heard of you and they want to kind of see what you're up to, where would you want to point them to find you?
Yeah, so lodgewood.com, of course, all one word, LODGEWOOD, is the website. And on there, you'll see the entire inventory of guns that we have for sale, the parts that we offer, the other products and services that we offer. And then I also have a gallery page of all of my, not all of them, because unfortunately they don't all make it to the website. Some of them have to get shipped before. There's a lot of cool stuff that I would love to have pictures of. But I've got a lot of pictures of the custom builds that I've done for people in the past.
Oh, cool.
So you can get an idea of the type of work that I do. It's our gallery. I think it's called the Gallery of Custom Builds. It's a tab on the website, and that's what I would consider closest to an artist portfolio, if you wanted to call it that.
Yeah.
That's got a lot of my work on there, stuff that we're currently working on. I also have a pitiful social media presence.
Oh, come on now.
I have we have a Facebook page, which is Lodgewood MFG. We have an Instagram page, which is the same as the Facebook page, but just on a different platform.
Smart.
Which is also Lodgewood MFG. And there are some... I post updates there from time to time. I'm not good at social media. Not like you. I mean, you're making memes about muzzleloading, and I'm like, he's making muzzleloading sexy for the kids. Let's go.
Let's go. We're going to make it funny.
Yeah, right.
That's right. Oh, man.
Your captions are the greatest.
Thank you.
Honey, wake up. I love muzzleloading. Posted another video of him sanding a stock. I was laughing about that.
There's 2 hours of close-ups of files on wood. I can't wait.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's the best place to take a look and see what we do. And other than that, I do a lot of shows.
Cool.
We'll be going to Louisville to the show of shows at the end of the month in February, and then a show in Chicago and Baltimore, and Kalamazoo.
You're going to Kalamazoo?
I'm going to the Kalamazoo show for the very first time.
Let's go. Yes.
I've never been, because it's always the same weekend as the Baltimore Antique Arms Show. But the Baltimore show is a week later. And I don't know if Kalamazoo was earlier, but I was like, I've wanted to go forever. I've known about it since I started at Lodgewood.
Yeah.
It's in 2012 I found out about it. Never been able to go. So we're making the pilgrimage.
Cool.
We're going to come by. Yeah.
Okay, well, I will find you. As Daniel Day-Lewis
I'll find
would say.
you.
Okay, super. We'll have to. We'll set some time aside and talk for sure. That's awesome. I'm so glad to hear that.
You're probably going to be pretty busy that weekend. So
I will be pretty busy, but I will make time. Absolutely. Like I was gonna ask you about Kalamazoo. And I was gonna ask you about CLA. If you had any interest in trying to get to that one, or if you were just busy enough that wasn't a thing. But I've never been so happy that Baltimore was moved.
Me too. It's always over St. Patty's Day, and for some reason it's like the 23rd. So I'm like, hey, Kalamazoo, here we come.
I hope it continues doing that, because I would like to be able to go to Baltimore someday.
Oh, you gotta. I mean, honestly, when it comes to Antique Arms Show, Baltimore is my favorite.
Yeah,
there is stuff there that you never see anywhere else. I was handling a ivory stocked wheel lock hand mortar. On a guy's table that dated to like 1590. It was Italian, and it was just gorgeous.
Those
and of course,
awesome.
The guy goes, "You can pick it up and handle it if you want to," and I'm like, okay. I think he had $50,000 on it or something like that, and I was like, all right, well, this is the closest I'm gonna get. Yeah,
you're a business owner. That's chump change. Come on now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, my luck would probably be in pieces by the time I got home. Yeah.
Right. That's when you take it out of the case at home, and for some reason it's ugly, like it's just hideous, and just it's like the show lights were doing something to it.
Yeah, the lighting was better in there. Yeah, or it's darker. Yeah,
yeah, like what's that Seinfeld, where his date looks better in certain lighting.
Oh yeah,
something.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of the horror show, but for muzzleloading. But I'd like to thank David for coming onto the program and taking time out of his schedule, away from his family, to hang out and talk a little bit about muzzleloading and his passion for it. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation. I had a ton of fun, as I always do, but it's really great to meet and talk with somebody new for a couple hours about muzzleloading. I'm excited to catch up with David at the Kalamazoo Living History Show later here in March 2025. I have links in the show notes and the video description for you, as well as at ilovemuzzleloading.com for a variety of the topics that we talked about in this episode for you to easily check out if you'd like to. But if nothing else, check out David's social media pages. He's posting some neat stuff, some great works in progress, and you get to see a little bit of behind the scenes for the kind of work that David's doing, which if you like this kind of stuff, you'll be like me, and I enjoy it, so you'll enjoy it too. Once again, I'm Ethan. I love muzzleloading. Thank you so much for watching or listening. We'll catch you next time. Well, cool, man. Thank you very much. I think this was really great. I had a lot of fun.
Thank you.
You're a really funny, really smart dude.
Oh, well, thank you.
I'm not trying to butter you up, but I had a lot of fun.
Oh, stop. You stop.
Dude. Yeah. Oh, cool. That's
yeah, I had a great time.
Good.
Yeah, and I don't mean to butter you up, but like I really appreciate what you're doing with ilovemuzzleloading.com and just making it more accessible for people. Like I was talking about before, the barrier to entry for muzzleloading is high because if you got a breech loader, you go to your local sporting goods store, you buy whatever ammunition is printed on the side of the gun, and then you make sure that the pointy end goes forward. And you put that in the gun and you shoot it. It's easy as that. And you don't even have to clean it if you don't want to. I mean, you should, but it's not going to be horrible.
We can be
dirty. With the muzzleloader, yeah, we can be dirty.
We're already sinning by breech loading, so.
I know, right. Well, yeah, we can make up a penance by not taking as good a care of them as we do our muzzleloaders.
There we go. That's right.
But with the muzzleloader, it can be pretty daunting for people. And I can't tell you how many first muskets I've sold to people. And they go, okay, what do I do now? And I go, YouTube is a great reference. Check out YouTube. There's a lot of great instructional videos that guys are doing on how to take care of them, the care and feeding of your new muzzleloader.
Yeah.
And, like I said, that's one thing that is different even in the last 25 years since I shot my first brown best for the very first time. So yeah, keep it up, man.
Thank you.
I think it's important work. You're doing the Lord's work out there, spreading the gospel message of muzzleloading.
I joke with people that I'm spreading the good word, but it feels like that sometimes.
Absolutely.
It's the passion of it. I've been up since about 3:30 this morning, and I don't want to be doing anything else. It's just, spending time with my family, but it's that passion of it that's just fun to do. And when there was a guy yesterday came in, he drove from Oshkosh, Wisconsin to come to the coffee shop.
Up in my neck of the woods. That's where my wife grew up.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And he brought his iPad and showed me a video of the kit that he had built following some of my videos. And it was just like...
Nice.
Because when I'm in the shop in the early mornings or at night before the wife and daughter are awake, I'm just a crazy person talking to a camera, about filing and sanding wood. But somebody like that brings me a picture of what they've made. I'm like, this is real. Like this is actually doing something. And that's just incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's awesome. Yeah, keep it up.
Thank you. And you keep it up too. I have a Lodgewood wish list that's always running. It seems like of just like, oh,
let's make it happen.
Oh yeah,
let's do a collab, as the cool YouTubers say.
Oh yeah, get some sponsorship.
we're gonna get our 18th century plate carriers on and go shoot some muskets. Huh?
I have. It's very ornery, but I have several videos like ironed out for when it gets warmer, kind of playing into that and just like goofing on it.
Oh, I love it.
We're like
I can't wait.
In the chest rig, instead of magazines, it's like powder horns. And it's like short starters and things. And so like
yeah. Oh, you got it. The 12 apostles, I think, is probably as close as they ever got to magazine pouches, right?
Yeah. But just going out in a chest rig with it fully loaded and just be running through the woods just pulling powder horns out.
You gotta get your helmet, but like put some feathers in it and stuff.
Yeah, I want to get I want to get a cheap like Amazon tricorn and put 2 cheap spy glasses on it like nods and like mount off there.
Yes. That's absolutely. You got to get your "Don't Tread on Me" patch.
That's right. Too. Yeah. And maybe I'll get like a muscle suit too for that one. I don't know. Like that's just where it's like I get a little bit of ad revenue. I want to have a little fun with it now and then, you know.
Yeah, you gotta. And the gun tubers have just become obnoxious.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
I could go on for hours. I'll let you go. The next time we'll talk about gun tubers.
Oh yeah, let's do it. I got a lot of opinions about gun culture.